Okay, I want to tell you a biblical story about a guy named Nehemiah and the discouraging realities that he went through. But before I dive right into his story, you need to know a little bit about the background because there's some world history here that's important. In about 600 BC, 600 years before Christ, a guy whose name is Nebuchadnezzar. It's a good one, right? We're going to have a lot of good names today. Nebuchadnezzar, let's just call him King Nebi, okay? King Nebi is in charge of he's the leader of a country known as Babylon. You've heard that word before, right? Usually it's in a movie with a lot of creative stuff like Babylon 5 or it's like big. Okay, Babylon historically, it's a country. It was they were growing because they would defeat other peoples, and they had a method of operation. When they would capture you and your country, they would take all of your leaders, all of your influencers, everybody with all the like uppity last names, all of those folks, and they would take all of them into captivity, and they would try to make them Babylonian. And then once they converted them, and it might take 50 years or 100 years or even 200 years to transition these like seriously Jewish people, turn them into Babylonians over time. And then they actually would send them back to their country to lead the country as a Babylonian state. That's kind of their method of operation. So they come into the country, they capture all the leaders, influencers, and others in about 605, 606 BC, and they take them back to Babylon where they start to indoctrinate them and make them this new thing, okay? Then after that, what happens is that about 70 years later, the Babylonian army, they were defeated by a guy you've heard of from your old history classes. His name was Cyrus of Persia, or we call him Cyrus the Great, okay? Cyrus the Great in 539 BC comes in and defeats Nebuchadnezzar's country and takes over Babylon. And so now everyone that was Babylonian slaves are now Persian slaves, okay? The Persians were the country that ruled the earth right before the Roman Empire took over. So that's where we are historically. Here's the cool thing about Cyrus. Cyrus as a whole is a pretty good guy, and he decides, I don't want slaves. These people are all from Judah and Jerusalem. Let's send them back. They can have their freedom. You guys are free to go. And he lets all of them, thousands and thousands of Hebrew people, go back to Judah. When they go back to Judah, they go in 3 big waves. The first wave is led by a guy named Zerubbabel. That sounds like I made that up, doesn't it? I know it does. His name is Zerubbabel. And Zerubbabel, there's not a lot about him in the Bible. All we know is he went back, he took some people. When he got there, he found that the wall, the structure, the fort wall, if you will, that is all around the city of Jerusalem, the capital of the southern country of God's people, it was demolished. It was in shambles. It was broken down, literally stones just taken apart, laying everywhere. For 70 years, this town has been without a leader, without an inhabitant, and the walls are just crumbled. And so Zerubbabel's job is take people back, rebuild the wall. That's your job. Go back, rebuild the wall. It's pretty straightforward, right? Well, 10, 15 years go by and no wall. Zerubbabel is depressed, he's down, he's frustrated, no wall. So then a second wave of people come, and their leader's name is Ezra, okay? Ezra, some of you know, Ezra has a book in the Bible. Ezra is somebody we've heard a lot about. But one of the things Ezra is supposed to do when he gets there is rebuild the wall. Ezra has a lot of good things happen, but one thing Ezra does not do is in his time as a leader in that area, the wall doesn't get rebuilt. Not at all. In fact, now we're not just 70 years from a wall being torn down. Now it's the third wave of people coming back, and we're almost 100 years, 90 some odd years of no wall around Jerusalem, no protection for the city, and no power in their kingdom. And a guy named Nehemiah comes to Jerusalem with his followers. The final wave of people have left Babylon and gone home. And when he gets there, here's what he's expecting. He's expecting a wall. He's expecting a powerful city. He's expecting that these 2 previous leaders have accomplished their goals. And when he gets there, what he finds is no wall. But even worse, he finds a people who are broken, depressed, defeated. Can you imagine what it would be like for just a moment to live a life where, and I know we don't have to imagine, many of us have been there, okay? When you pray, you feel like you're praying to a God who's defeated. When you hope, you feel like you're getting your hope from a situation that is hopeless. When you're trying to get yourself excited and full of joy, you feel like your joy is temporary and plastic. And in the long run, one hope-filled man in Nehemiah is surrounded by an entire country of people who don't think it's ever going to happen, who don't think it's ever going to get better. All of a sudden, in that kind of environment, you lose hope with your leaders, you lose hope with your country, you lose hope for the future, and you kind of anticipate things getting worse. We call it cynicism, worry, doubt. You guys know what it's like to be there? Depressed cities, not just depressed people. That's what we're living in our world, I think. It's why so often that, politically, it doesn't really matter who we elect. We don't think it's going to work. It doesn't really matter we don't think it's going to work. It doesn't really matter what changes happen. We as a culture don't really believe it's going to do anything. That's exactly where Nehemiah found himself. He found himself in a place where the people had no hope. But he did. One man has enough hope for an entire country. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you the end of the story, okay? The end of the story is that for 90 some odd years, they tried to build a wall and they weren't able to build it. And when Nehemiah comes on the scene, they complete the wall in 52 days. 52 days, not even 2 months. That's what one person with some hope can do in a situation where there seems to be no hope. So today, I'd like to go to Nehemiah and learn something from him. How does that sound? Let's do it. He knows what hope is about. I'd like him to teach us. The first thing you got to realize is that discouragement leads to destruction. If you are discouraged, you have to catch yourself and realize, I'm discouraged. Do nothing about it, and you will find yourself in a place of destruction down the road. Discouragement leads to destruction. But the truth is, hope can build walls of protection. Okay? Discouragement leads to destruction. Here's what the scripture says in Nehemiah 2:17. Then I said to them, I love this. He's talking to all these discouraged people, right? He says, okay, listen up. You see the trouble we're in? Jerusalem, our capital city, it lies in ruins. And its gates have been burned with fire. Okay, I want to time out right there and go, I don't think that he is a very good counselor. You know? Like, when I've done counseling before, somebody comes in with their marriage and they're like, it's bad. And I want to go, oh, it's not that bad. And I want to kind of convince them that it's not that bad. And then I did that for a while until I realized it was that bad. It really was. It was that bad. In fact, it was worse than they thought it was. And so now as a marital counselor, I tend to see how bad you think it is, try to convince you it's worse. You know what I'm saying? Okay, don't have a lot of repeat customers. But here's what I'm saying. If you want to have hope, you have to have your head in reality. Okay? You have to start with an honest understanding of where you are. If you don't have your head in reality, if for you the word hope means pretend, that's not hope. Okay? The world is falling around me. I'm going to pretend that it's not and call that hope. No. That's called denial. That's what that's called. Okay? That's called denial. Hope means you see the reality for what it is and you genuinely know that it can get better and that it's going to get better and that you aren't going to stop until it gets better. That's hope, okay? That's not denial. So make sure you do that. You have to realize where things are. Be honest about life, okay? So when it's bad, you don't have to go, well, it's not really that bad. No, it really stinks. It really does. For some people, right? You look at your own life and you go, this is not good. This is not good at all. And anybody who loves you enough to tell you will tell you, this is not good. Okay? So you have to start there. When you start there are a few things that you need to get. First, here's what we see. He says, Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. And then he says, come on, everybody. Let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem and we will no longer live in disgrace. In the first chapter of Nehemiah, here is how he begins. First, he says this, When I heard these things, I sat down. When I heard how depressed everyone was, okay? When I heard how defeated my people were, he says, I sat down and I cried. Remember, he has his head in reality. This is as bad as it looks. For some days, he said, for several days, I mourned, I fasted, and I prayed before the God of heaven. And then I said, O Lord God of heaven, great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and obey his commands. The first thing that you got to do, you guys, if you want to have hope, is you have to learn to refresh your spirit. Refresh. What does he do? In his world, he pulls off to himself. He mourns. That means he deals with the reality. He's honest about the pain. But in the process of mourning, he fasts and prays. Okay, in our culture, we say pray all the time. We kind of think we know what prayer is. Let me toss out just the real clear thing of what it is that he does, okay? The first thing he does is that he fasts. That doesn't mean he runs. That doesn't mean he climbs. Fast, a totally different thing. This is about robbing himself of his normal daily routine, and it usually in the Bible is wrapped around food. So he literally took a few days and did not eat anything. You might be wondering, that's dumb. You might be thinking, why would you not eat? I'm sad. I'm still hungry. You know what I mean? Okay. In fact, when you're sad, sometimes you're even more hungry, right? Okay, so here's what he's saying. He takes, you know why you're hungry when you're sad, by the way? This is a biblical thing. This is not just, you're hungry because you're hungry when you're sad, because we are in many ways kind of built to go to food as a god. And when we need something to reassure us, we go get our comfort from it. That's why we call it comfort food, okay? So sometimes when we're more hungry when we're sad, it's actually, we need to say, you know what, I am more hungry when I'm sad, but I'm going to choose not to do that because I'm going to focus on, if you will, stretching the metaphor, but I'm going to eat the meal that will genuinely fill me. And that means I'm going to go to God with this. He takes some time and he mourns, he doesn't eat, and in the process, instead of eating, he just literally pours himself out to God. Here's what prayer is. Prayer is a two-way relationship. It's not us telling God what's wrong. That's part of it, but that's not all there is to it. When you pray, you're not only talking to God, but you're opening your ears to hear from God. I want to tell you something. If you think it's encouraging to tell God your problems, it is more encouraging for God to tell you the solution. And you will never hear him say that if you're not listening. Okay? Fasting is part of listening. We choose not to eat sometimes in order to talk to God, but then in order to listen to him, okay? It's just a way of opening our ears to the one who has the answers to our biggest problems. Make sense? Okay. Let's go on. We have to refresh our spirit. Yesterday I ran my first ever official 5K. That's 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles. Okay? Henson men, we weren't really built for distance. You know what I'm saying? I'm not really a long runner. That's not my thing. So here's the deal. I've been trying. Now, I haven't ever run 3.1. I've never run an outdoor official 5K before, and the way I train is by obviously not doing it. But yeah, the way I train for 3 miles is to run half a mile. You know, I figure if I do that 6 times, I'm there. So here's the deal. I went into this nervous. Now, it was 40 degrees. It was kind of rainy in Smithland. And by the way, for those of you at the Lakes campus, it was a little too cold and a little too rainy for your Pastor Caleb to run. So he did something else while we ran. So love you, Pastor Caleb. That was fun. It was my one chance to appear slightly more manly than Caleb. It almost never happens. It almost never happens for me, so I had to take up the opportunity to do it, you know. I love you, Skinner. Okay, so here's the deal. I run, and I have behind me an 18 or 19-year-old girl. Her name's Kelsey. She is my first cousin's daughter, so that would be first cousin once removed or second cousin or whatever you call that. And she's cocky, and she's confident, and she's competitive. And before the race, she told me her only goal was to beat me. That's all that mattered. And so I decided not to let that happen. So I'm running, And the whole time, I'm thinking about two things. I'm thinking about ending the race, and I'm thinking about where is Kelsey. That's the two issues for me. And like 12 times in 3 miles, she passed me, I passed her. She passed me, I passed her. And, that was good. But anyway, in the end, I'm like maybe a tenth of a mile ahead of her, okay? And it's time to walk. Like when I run 3 miles, I run a mile, walk a half a mile, run a mile, walk half a mile. That's kind of my goal. So it's time to walk. And I can't walk because she's right there. You know what I'm saying? And so I can see the high school where the finish line is up in it's probably half a mile from me, and I'm running. And there's this new song. I don't know what the song is called. I have it on my iPod, but the guy who won American Idol last year, I think it's his new song. And the song comes on my iPod, and I kid you not, the chorus is, if only I could stop running. And okay, so I'm giggling. I'm running, I'm singing, if only I could stop running. Yeah, I wish I could, but I can't because Kelsey's right there. So I'm running. It's all about to go. You know what I mean? Like my ankles, my feet, my knees, my hips, my lungs, my shoulders, everything is telling me to stop. And Kelsey's telling me, stop, Brad, so I can pass you. And, okay, there's a guy named Brock I think he's from Calvert City. I've met him a few times at Pastor Caleb's house. And Brock is just probably a little bit older than I am, but in much better shape. Like Brock's the guy who wore the full-length leotard. You know what I mean? Like he knew what he was doing. He's run these things before. And Brock finished a long time ago at this point. He's been out of the race, had lunch, washed his car, and come back to see who. And so I get like half a mile or so from the finish line, and all I see is Brock. Now, he's in a bright yellow shirt, so it's obvious who it is. And he's running as fast as he can run straight toward me. And I'm thinking, this dude is going to show me up. He's going to lap me. You know what I mean? Like I hate this. And when he gets to me, we're in a small, like 6 feet wide in this path. He gets to me, and he spins around, and he smacks me on the behind. Flat-handed, not cupped. Guys, if you need guidance on this, okay, flat-handed, that's okay. That's sports, that's football. Cupped, you're not allowed to do that, okay? Flat-handed. Anyway, he smacks me on the behind, and he says, come on, preacher. And I'm like, I don't even know you. I'm like, okay, so I'm trying, and he's running literally, you guys, Lakes Campus, I wish you could see that. He's running sideways faster than I'm running straight. And he's cheering me on, like, come on, I got my headphones in, I have no idea what he's saying. And it looks encouraging, And so I can tell. So I take one earphone out of the earbud, and I can hear him now. And he's going, you can do this. The finish line's inside. Come on. You can do it. He's giving me all this encouragement. And here's what happened. For just a moment, I forgot about my feet and my ankles and my knees and my hips and my stomach and my lower back and my kidneys and, and my lungs and my shoulders and my teeth and my head. I forgot about my hair that hurt. I forgot about all of that. And I just thought how goofy he looks running sideways and how much he wants me to finish. Before you know it, I'm a half a mile down. I'm like 0.2 of a mile ahead of Kelsey. And I turn the corner, and when I turn the corner, we're in the parking lot of the high school now in Livingston County, and I can see the finish line, and it's these like ticker tapes where they've got all kinds of ribbons, and they've got a great big clock with a really big number on it by this time, and probably 40 people, and they're all cheering, and they're waving flags, and they're jumping up and down, and one of them has a water bottle, which I'm excited about, and about 1/10 of a mile before I get to the finish line, Brock just curls off to the side and stops. And I finish on my own, okay? That's encouragement. You know what I mean? And Brock, for me, refreshed my spirit. See what I'm saying? That's what I'm talking about, okay? That's what I'm talking about. You have to refresh your spirit or find someone who can, okay? Because if you don't, discouragement will lead to destruction in every case. The second reality in that story is that Nehemiah really, really learned to rely on God, didn't he? He went to God with his issues. He prayed, he fasted, and all that stuff. But then he ends with, you remember what I read in Nehemiah 1:5, I think it is? He says, then I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him. He keeps it with those who love him and obey his commands. All of a sudden, he starts to have hope just built on who God is. Not the circumstances or the trials or the troubles or the difficulties or anything. Just simply, God is big enough I can rely on Him, okay? He took His eyes off the circumstances, off the limitations, off of the struggles, and He put His hope in who God is. About 6 months ago, I was working with Jackson, my 5-year-old, in his bedroom, and I don't remember what he asked me to do, but he said, maybe you've had this happen to you before, he said, Daddy, I can't do that. Can you do that for me? And it was like reach up on a shelf and get something. I mean, it wasn't a big deal. I do it, and he looks at me with these big, dark brown eyes, and they're real wide open, and he's full of joy, and he goes, is there anything you can't do? And I had a hard time answering that question, because I wanted to continue this amount of faith. I just said, son, as you get older, you'll figure out what the things are that I can't do. You'll figure that out, And you see, that's not true when a 5-year-old looks at his dad like that, but when we look at God like that, that is real. That we can have that kind of understanding. Is there anything God can't do? No. Now, to be honest, there are things He might choose not to do, and there are things He might choose not to do when you want Him to do them. He might do them later. But there's nothing He can't do. And there is no level of goodness that He is not willing to attain. Okay? So we can look at God with this, is there anything you can't do kind of attitude. Okay, Lakes Campus? That's a reality. Okay, let's keep going. The next thing that happens is that Nehemiah finds some opposition. Okay? Somebody who thinks he's an idiot. Now, just so you know, when you're surrounded by discouraged people and you are the hopeful one, not everyone will be excited about your hope, right? Some people will be thinking, what, are you crazy? Remember, I told you, discouragement, it's contagious, okay? Sometimes discouraged people want to discourage you. You have to watch out for that. So here's what happens. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite, basically the Horonite and the Ammonite, they get uptight. That's what happens, okay? And then another guy, several people, they all gather together, they gang up on him. It says they mocked him, they despised him, and they start saying, what is your problem? Why are you doing this? And then he ends this in Nehemiah 2:20. He says, the God of heaven will give us success. We are His servants, and so we will start building this wall. I want to talk to you about the difference between a coach and a critic, okay? Both of them, by the way, will tell you when you're wrong. Both of them occasionally will discourage you, a coach and a critic. They'll both discourage you, right? But there's a huge difference. You see, a critic tells you discouraging things because they want to discourage you. They want you to fail. That's a critic. A coach is someone who may tell you something that is discouraging when you hear it, but they're telling you that because they want you to succeed. You see the difference? There's a huge difference. I'm going to tell you something. The success in your life, in many ways, will greatly depend on whether or not you can tell the difference between a coach and a critic, and whether or not you know who to not listen to and who to listen to readily. So, sub-point here, I think we should make a rule, put it in the bylaws for the church, okay? I think we should agree to gang tackle critics. What do you think about that? Gang tackle, dog pile, that's what I'm talking about. Critics. Because here's what a critic does. A critic is someone, just to be blunt, okay, who's so unhappy in their own space and their own time and so unwilling to let God change that the only way for them to feel better is to make everybody else unhappy with them. And they will bring them down. They will do great damage, and they are difficult to deal with. And God, if I were to do a whole sermon on criticism, God has very little good to say about someone who has a critical spirit, okay? Just know that. At the same time, we are all coaches or coached by someone. God wants us to deal with honest reality, what our struggles are. And if you need somebody to say, you have a problem in this area, that doesn't mean they're a critic. Because they might be telling you that because they want you to improve, they want you to grow, they want you to mature, they want to help you. So you have to know the difference. I say we gang tackle critics. Here's what I'm telling you about. Several months ago, it may have even been years ago, I'm at lunch with a critic. Okay? First mistake, right? I said we should gang tackle them. Guess what I did? I took them on mano a mano, one-on-one, okay? Went to lunch together. We did do it in a public place so that I would be nice. That was my goal. And for about 3 hours, I listened to all kinds of personal criticism. about how I dress, what my hair looks like, whether or not I have facial hair. I listen to criticism about my kids. I listen to criticism about my spouse. I listen to criticism about my sermons. I listen to criticism about everything. You can just imagine we had a list, you know what I mean, to go through, a big, long list. And I went into that thinking, I'm tough. I can handle one critic, no big deal. I can deal with this. So I'm 3 hours in. I mean, like we've eaten like breakfast and lunch both by now. You know what I mean? We're really, the restaurant, they've made a lot of tip money off us. Okay, so we're there. And it just so happens that another person, another leader actually from the church, walks in the restaurant and sees this conversation. And I don't think I'm that transparent, but I'm guessing that my face showed the beauty of the last 3 hours. You know what I'm saying? I'm guessing that's what happens. And this person who comes up, who's female, the critic and I are both male, this woman comes up, and when she comes up, just like good Western Kentucky boys, we both stand up from our chair, right? We say, hey, how are you? We greet her. And I don't know what's going on. I think maybe God was just really using this woman in a great way. She walks over to me, puts her arm around me, looks at the critic and goes, I don't know what you guys are talking about, but I love our church and I love you as our pastor, and I think everything is so wonderful right now, and anybody who doesn't is a fool. And I was like, yes! I was like, yeah. I was like, okay. Now, I'm serious. I was like, I can't say that, Okay, that's what I mean, gang tackle critics. I mean, if we have somebody who's a critical spirit, you can't take them on one-on-one in your life. They'll bring you down. They'll hurt you. They'll break you. But if you can find people who love them and care about them and want to be a coach to them, okay, who can help them deal with the critical spirit, you get 8 or 10 of you, and you could probably help them, okay, versus just turning it into a fight. If you go one-on-one, it's a fight. See the difference? That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying with gang tackling critics. Okay. At the end of the service, if we're all talking and somebody gang tackles somebody back there, literally, okay, the insurance company told me I had to say that's not what I mean. Okay, I'm not being literal. Okay, let me keep going here, and we'll finish up. The third thing you need to know is that we have to refocus on serving. Okay, we replenish our spirit. We rely on God. We focus on serving. Here's what I mean. The coaches and the critics, that's winning language, right? Like we want to win and we don't want to lose. The truth is it's not about winning or losing. The scripture says the God of heaven will give us success. That's where his confidence comes from. The God of heaven will give us success. He's not saying, I will win. He's saying, God will win. I will serve. See the difference? So we refocus on serving. It's not about winning. It's about doing what God told you to do. Okay? I love this in Nehemiah 4. There's just 5 little words after all this criticism. It just says, so we continued to work. I love that. Number 3 and number 4 are kind of tied together. We refocus on serving. And lastly, you guys, we refuse. What's the R word? We refuse to give up. Absolutely refuse. I'm telling you, you're being called to be stubborn. Refuse to give up. You simply don't quit. A lot of times in life, the difference between the person who finishes doing what God told them to do and the person who tried to do what God told them to do is that one of them said, I will not stop until I've done it. And the other one said, this is too hard. I'm not going to do it anymore. You refuse to give up. In this story, Nehemiah, it happened, it's crazy, it happened in 52 days. But it was a very difficult 52 days. Refuse to give up. Nehemiah 4:14 says, after I looked things over, I stood up and I said to the people, the officials, the nobles, and the rest of the people, I said to them, do not be afraid. Remember the Lord. He is great and awesome. And then, he says, this is his guidance, fight for your brothers, fight for your sons, fight for your daughters, fight for your wives, fight for your homes. In other words, I know you're sweating, I know your back hurts, I know the rocks are heavy. Keep building the wall. Don't stop. Don't stop. Keep going. Don't stop. That's what he's saying over and over and over. Nehemiah chapter 6 says, so the wall was completed in 52 days. When all of our enemies heard about this, I love this, when all of our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid, and they lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God.